Loglines are kind of tricky. They're kind of like YouTube titles, I feel like. For example, for a podcast, like an hour-long podcast conversation, it's tricky to narrow that down to one short sentence, like that whole long conversation. And that's kind of the same thing in a logline, right? Like a
Yeah.
120-page screenplay narrowed down to a one sentence.
Yeah, that's why writers find it so challenging, especially, if you've written the whole script and you know all of those details about your story and all those like intricate things that you planned and they're so beautiful on the page. It's very hard to kind of strip that back to just the basics, but that's essentially what should be in your log line, right? It's those foundational elements that we talked about. And that I just think of it as like a selling tool, right? So, I mean, ultimately, when you write the log line that you're using as a pitch, you want it to accurately convey the movie that you had in mind when you wrote that screenplay, right? So you want to give a real sense of what that screenplay will be when they read it and what that movie ultimately would be, hopefully that you have in mind. Um, and I always tell writers to go for accuracy because you don't want to give someone a log line that feels like a bait and switch. If you give them the log line and they're like, oh, that sounds great, and then you give them the screenplay and it's something completely different.
Yeah.
You want your log line
Hmm.
to reflect the story that you're actually telling, so that they get what they're asking for.
That's so interesting. It's so similar to YouTube, actually, like social media,
Yeah.
because, it's this exact same thing with a YouTube title. You want it to be very accurate because even though your click through rate might increase with a good title, your
Hmm.
watch time is going to decrease tremendously if the video is not about what the title was suggesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly the same. And I think of it as like, selling a product. It's if you pitch someone a log line that is doesn't accurately reflect the screenplay and they're interested in the log line, right? Then you're not doing yourself any favors because once they read the screenplay, they're not probably going to be as interested. They thought they were getting this and instead they
Yeah.
got this. So you're really helping yourself if you can find a way to accurately sell the thing that you have. If you can
Mhm.
present the thing that you have accurately but in its best light, that's the best log line.
Do you think people might oversell their logline and not make it very accurate because they are insecure about how their screenplay is, perhaps?
Sometimes I think sometimes people write log lines that or they start the process of writing the log line and then they feel like it doesn't sound very interesting. Like once they strip their story down to just the basics, they worry that it doesn't sound very unique or very entertaining or whatever. But I think that's a matter of finding the right phrasing rather than, throwing in different elements that you think are going to be more interesting. Cause it's like you really do want to believe in the story that you wrote, right?
Mm.
It's a good test though before you actually write the screenplay. Can you strip it down to the basics and is it still compelling enough? Is like, what is it that's compelling about that idea that makes you want to write it? And hopefully that's the thing that other people will find intriguing and make them want to read it.